Is it? It's on. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Gentlemen mostly, actually. So heating is supposed to be the big next topic, but I'm afraid to say that the fossil fuel session is obviously attracting more people, so we are kind of in a family grouping here, but I have no doubt that we will go for interesting sessions though. My name is Alexandra Somstay. I represent here the European Commission. I work for DG Energy in the Renewable Energy Unit. And today, so we will try to address the main challenges ahead of us when it comes to heating and cooling, this subsector of renewable energy. So we will start with an overview of the challenges in this sector. We'll try to look at some of the best practices, especially with the case of the Netherlands. We will also have a look at the areas where there is too little public intervention and where there is a need to actually upgrade the public support or the regulatory mechanisms that are currently in force. Which are the accompanying measures that we could think of or import from some interesting best practice, and how can we, the REN community, help in the support of this new development path for heating and cooling. So I would like to welcome today our keynote speaker, Werner Weiss from the Institute for Sustainable Technology. Werner is actually the director. He was also the chairman of the Solar Heating and Cooling Program at the IEA. And he is a board member of the European Technology Platform on Renewable Heating and Cooling. Werner, you have the floor for 15 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for your nice introduction. Thank you for joining us for the Renewable Heating and Cooling session. Significantly less interest than in electricity. This just reflects the reality in policy. Okay, I will try to tell you something on how to boost renewable heating and cooling in the next 15 minutes. Just the content of my presentation, the total global final energy consumption. Even if I hope you all have it in mind, maybe there are some people from the electricity field here to give them also some overview what it is. The relevance of heating and cooling in general, heat in policy and public awareness, as you know, it's quite low. Potential of renewable sources for heating and cooling in Europe, so what is the potential? The focus on electricity might lead to wrong policy. I show you one positive example. Energy subsidies and funding at end and some brief conclusions. The total final energy consumption worldwide, data from 2011, it was 322 exajoule worldwide. And as you can see, electricity accounts for about 20% of the total final energy demand. And 99% of the energy discussion is on this 20%. So we're always discussing energy is electricity. It was the same just in the break. It was the same in the session before. When people talk about energy, they talk about electricity, and they neglect that they are talking about 20% of the total final energy demand. About 27% is on transport, and roughly 50% worldwide is heating and cooling, mainly heating, and something like 50-50 in the building sector and in the industry sector. It's the same picture on European scale, more or less. 28% of the total final energy consumption accounts for heat. So it's on the worldwide scale, it's the same like on the European scale. Heat plays an important role worldwide. So if you just look on the European sector, then it's about 45% is in the residential sector, mainly used for space heating and hot water preparation, but nearly the same amount of heat is used in industry, 34%. And the majority of this heat in industry is low temperature heat. It's not high temperature heat. So this can be covered as well by renewables. But if you look to other regions worldwide, I just picked out Africa, then it's nearly 80% is in the residential sector. And it's mainly low temperature heat, of course, for hot water preparation, and it's used in hotels, in hospitals, but also, of course, in the private houses. I got 2 sentences from the organizers of this conference, and I was really astonished. It shows again the view on renewable heat, that I got this, I think it's somewhere even in the program. Today, modern biomass, solar thermal and geothermal meet a small but gradually rising share of final heat demand globally. Second sentence, nevertheless, the heating and cooling sector still lags considerably behind the power sector, both in market volume and policy design. I agree just with policy design. The rest, I don't agree at all. Because when you look on the electricity demand and you cover something like 20%, it's 20% of the 20%. If we cover 10%, what we had just in the break, we cover 10% of 50%. So it's completely, even here in people who are aware of renewable heating and cooling, what I thought, have these sentences, and I just looked at it a little bit in different studies. IRENA, in their remap study, just renewable energy share in different sectors. You see the blue parts show heat. In the industry, it's mainly renewable heat. It's a small part of renewable electricity. Buildings, again, the majority is heat, renewable heat. Small part is renewable electricity. Transport, of course, these are transport fuels. Power, of course, this is power as such, is renewable electricity. And the district heating is mainly, of course, renewable heat. So again, where we are lagging behind? This is IRENA. So the heating and cooling sector still lags considerably behind power sector. I don't agree. If you look on the status of new renewables, so I do not show here hydropower and biomass, so the big 2 brothers on the heating sector and then the power sector. But if you look on the new renewables, is a study we are doing every year for the IEA Solar Heating and Cooling Program. Just look on the blue bars, it shows the installed capacity, comparing heat and power. So we are on the left-hand side, we have solar thermal heat, 330 gigawatt installed capacity. It's in the same range like the total installed wind power. It's 318. Photovoltaic, not even half. And if you look to solar thermal power, it's 3. It's less than 1% compared to solar heating and cooling. It's just figures and the awareness we all have, that's completely opposite. That's just, again, we are not lagging behind. We are very bad in communicating it. This sector lacks in good communication and awareness for policy, but it's not the reality. If you look on the share on renewable sources in final consumption of energy for heat, now just looking on heat, in some selected OECD countries, it is from the IEA Medium-Term Renewable Energy Market Report of 2013, then you can see in several countries we have already a considerable share of the total energy or of the heat consumption. Just showing, it's mainly biomass, of course, it's the green parts, it's mainly biomass. If you look to Israel, it's mainly solar thermal, which is also not well known. If you look to Denmark, and here I want to come also to point at least to excellent policy. I will show you a picture later. They are in the range of 30%. Also Austria is in the range of 30%. And then, of course, we have Sweden and Iceland. They have really high share, and Iceland is especially geothermal. So just showing very briefly just some pictures. In Denmark, solar thermal is really booming, solar thermal district heating. The success is basically because of high taxes on gas, an intelligent financing scheme, and they have no subsidies for these large-scale systems, and this is really booming. So solar thermal in north of Europe, booming, like nowhere worldwide. Another good example, solar-assisted biomass district heating in Austria. We have several hundred of biomass district heating networks. Some of them run it during summertime with a backup of solar thermal, but it's mainly based on biomass, long-term policy behind it. And of course, Iceland has a huge percentage covered by geothermal district heating or also power. Usually it's the combination. Just picking out three. Maybe that's also not well known, if you look to gross heat generation by fuel in Europe between 1990 and 2011, then you can see that the fossil fuel, solid fuels, was the top in 1990, went down considerably, but also petroleum went down considerably, is the orange line. And what went up was basically gas in this, and renewable heat. This went up significantly. And what is astonishing, more or less, by the year 2000, gas overtook the solid fuels, and on the lower level, renewables overtook the petroleum products. This is usually also underestimated or not well known. So that means we have more heat from renewables than from petroleum. So again, I think renewable heat did already a lot, achieved a lot, but not on policy level. These are the source, I think it's EU energy figures in the statistic pocket book. So I think a lot of people did not look in detail what really happened in this time, or we did not communicate it well. The potential for renewable energy sources for heating and cooling, this is a figure from the technology platform on renewable heating and cooling. So I think it's 2 years or 3 years ago, we asked ourselves what could be the contribution on the long run by 2050 in Europe. Could we deliver 100% of heating and cooling by renewables? And you can see the gray part shows you the renewable heat, what we expected in our study. And on the other hand, you see the two lines. We expect that the heat demand, there are two scenarios, is decreasing on the long run due to efficiency measures. So clearly we will have a lower need for heating, not for cooling, but for heating. It will decrease depending on two scenarios. And just to show you what we think could be done is, of course, the major part could be covered by biomass, but it could increase the share until 2030 in this range. If we want to continue with sustainable biomass, then it's more or less we at the end of the story. There's a slight increase possible, but not on sustainable basis. So then the other renewable heating and cooling sources means geothermal, deep geothermal, and aero and hydrothermal heat pumps, as well as solar thermal have to step in. And then we could cover in the range between 2040, so 2030, 2040, if there is policy in place, up to 100% of the heating demand in the European Union. What I also want to show you now, it's just focus on electricity might lead to wrong policy. Now I go from Europe to South Africa. Just to give you one idea, South Africa's electricity production looks something like this. So it's basically coal. It was the discussion also in the previous session here. So it's a lot of coal power plants. The problem is the reserve margin went smaller and smaller, and it's even worse than 2008. There was just 8 to 10%. Just now they have load shedding everywhere in Southern Africa because they all depend on the South African power production. This is a serious problem already for some years. And if you look closer where the electricity goes, especially in the residential sector, about 60% of the electricity in South Africa is used for hot water preparation, which is strange enough because they have no heating demand, so the electricity is basically for appliances, and the major part goes for hot water preparation. So the first idea was, of course, we go for PV because we're lacking in power. Electricity is missing. The other option would have been to go for solar thermal systems. So for power, you need cables and you need adjusting your net. So what was the decision? And I wanted to show you a positive example. So they go for, a 1 million solar water heater program. So the idea was to get rid of the peak power. Is also to go for solar water heating systems instead of going for electricity. So that if you need heat, especially if you need low temperature heat, it's absolutely stupid to produce electricity and downgrade it just to low temperature heat. But really big programs are missing, and I could tell a long story about the success. But in general, it was the right decision to go. So just very briefly, if you have just this system with a 3 square meter collector relates to 2.1 kilowatt thermal, with this you save about 3,400 kilowatt hours of electricity annually. And if they just what we considered, if they have a market penetration like Cyprus and Israel, they have the highest market penetration in solar thermal worldwide. So we just took this, it's already reality in these countries. If the South African would do the same, they would install something like 22 gigawatt of capacity, would produce 34 terawatt hours of electricity, gives you basic electricity for 3.4 million people for something like 30% of the price compared to PV. And I'm the last person who wants to blame people from PV. We need all renewables, absolutely all renewables for a sustainable renewables future. But if you need heat, I would not go first for electricity. It's just, in South Africa, in my point of view, in general, they went in the right direction. Finally, world subsidies for fossil fuels. It's also from the IEA World Energy Outlook, 2010 and 2011. It shows just still, I think all of you are aware of it, world subsidies for fossil fuels. And I think IEA, you know, it's not, or at least in history, it was not the best friend of renewables. So that's the source. Fossil fuel in 2009 was about $300 billion subsidy. If you look to renewable energy, it was something like 60 billion, and mainly for renewable-based electricity, something completely new, and something on biofuels. The question is, renewable heating and cooling does not exist, so it's not even shown here. So there is no subsidy, or compared to the other subsidies, it's neglectable. Of course, it exists, but also not in statistics. And my final slide also showed, as there are some colleagues here from the European Commission, this is final energy consumption in the EU in 2010. So 14% renewable heating and cooling, 33% other heating and cooling, 21% electricity, as we know, and 32% is transport. If you look on the funding for energy research, then renewable heating and cooling got 1%. At least it appears. But compared to the market, it's again nearly nothing. If you know other renewable heating and cooling, it's 6%. And again, electricity got 14%. So again, compared to the market size and what can be done, it's basically nothing. So I don't, again, want to blame the politicians. We also have to blame ourselves. We are not communicating in the right way. But this is what I try to do once again here. And this brings me to my conclusions. I think the importance of heating and cooling is neglected by policy and by the public. Mainly, I think, also due to the reason that we have not, if just a few big companies, big players, they are missing in the heating and cooling sector. Therefore, it's not so easy for politicians to target the right companies, the right people. That's much more diverse. Renewable heating and cooling provides significant shares of total final energy consumption already today. I hope I could show it to you. Renewable heating and cooling is the sleeping giant. The potential is significantly higher than renewable energy for electricity. And this leads me to the main topic. Without renewable heating and cooling, none of the environmental and energy-related targets can be reached. If you focus in the next 10 years, again, just on electricity, if you go to 100% electricity, you reach something like 20% renewables. That's it, because this is the share, even if the electricity demand might increase. In order to explore the huge potential of renewable heating and cooling, I think what is needed is to overcome the lack of policy support, to show the advantages of the decentralized nature of the sector. At the moment, it was always seen as a disadvantage, but it is decentralized. We have no worldwide players here. And also, of course, to increase the R&D funding and the rollout programs here, because this is also missing for the heating and cooling sector. With this, I thank you for your attention, and I hope we have something to discuss.
Well, thanks a lot, Werner. Very enlightening indeed. And thanks for this new name, the Sleeping Giant. I think this will be following us. Before having the other panelists coming to the floor, I would like to give a little flavor on the EU scene. Although this is supposed to be an international fora, but we will have EU restricted panelist member. But since I represent the European Commission, I would like to mention that we have been not able actually to cope enough with the heating and cooling sector so far in our renewable energy policy. Clearly, it would be an understatement to say that. Because, or thanks to the Ukraine gas crisis, politicians came to realize the fact that the security of supply crisis is actually a heating crisis. Especially for the vulnerable member states in the EU, in the north of the EU. It is also about job creation, and our politicians are in high demand of job creation. It is also an answer to energy storage. And all in all, this is bringing the European Commission for a renewed political momentum when it comes to the 2030 policy framework, some more focus will be put on heating, starting as of January with the launch of a new stakeholder consultation, with a big part touching on the heating and cooling sector. Now coming to the international spectrum, let me add the fact that, if I'm not wrong, the lion's share of the growth of the solar thermal sector is actually happening outside of the EU. And when it comes to heating, it's also an answer and a tool for poverty alleviation, because we're talking about electricity saving. So, I mean, I hope this gives you some more ideas to set the scene for our discussion. And with this, I am pleased to start with the women and call on Manon Jansen from Ecofis. Manon, please take a seat. Manon is the CEO of Ecofis, and she's happily joining us. I'd like to talk also Christoph Laskowski, sorry for your height of power. Christoph has been also serving previously at the IEA, and Burkhard Cerner from the European Geothermal Energy Council, who is actually the founder of the councils and who is a member also. Unfortunately, we're missing the representative from the World Biomass Association, but I understand that Burkhard will be kind enough to say a few words also about biomass. So, Burkhard, would you like to start?
Okay.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here. Well, geothermal and biomass have something in common. They are two energy sources that are very widely usable for power generation in both cases, but also for heating. and both have characteristics that are similar, that they are there whenever they're needed. I think this is what is the main difference from the solar thermal. So we have not really the storage problem. We have other problems, but not exactly so much the storage problem in that. So the big difference is that the geothermal energy is taking heat from the ground that is there and that is replenished from inside the Earth. The Earth is a net heat radiating planet. So the energy balance of the Earth is that the Earth is radiating heat into outer space. We are trying to keep it from radiating by increasing of the CO2 levels, but I hope we are not succeeding too much in that. So actually the Earth is radiating heat, and there is a heat source inside the Earth, which is natural fission of nuclear fission in the materials in the lower crust and the upper mantle of the Earth. So this is what we can see here as the main source for the geothermal heat. While in the biomass, of course, we have to harvest the our energy source. The basic source, of course, is the sun in this case. And while in geothermal, once the system is built, the heat from the Earth is there and can be used all the time. In biomass, it has to be regrown and reharvested, and you have to pay less for the installation, while you pay more for the operation, for the fuel itself. The energy doesn't cost anything in geothermal, it just costs something to get it out of the ground. But the energy cost is higher in biomass, of course. So this is the differences, while in the behavior of how we can use it, they're quite similar, these two sources. So I think most of us know about these technologies, and so I'll not go deeper into that, just to say in geothermal that, and also the same is for biomass, the technology can cover all kinds of sizes. So going from single family houses, in biomass even smaller, we are talking, of course, of single rooms or whatever you like. You can go from the smallest installation to big district heating systems. And that's the same for geothermal, with the geothermal heat pumps for single family houses, up to, again, district heating systems of several megawatts or tenth of megawatts of capacity. So this is what we have in technology-wise. Looking at the use worldwide, I see there is a big difference also in perception, like Werner was showing this morning. And while in Europe we have some policy and some awareness, actually, in particular in biomass, the most of the use is outside Europe. But it is traditionally grown. We heard this from Ghana in the previous session, that it's still a big amount of their energy share that is just the burning of wood. And there is a difference in this kind of use of biomass and of worldwide, and of what we are doing with advanced technology, and also with certain policy frameworks here in Europe. I'm not aware of similar policy frameworks elsewhere in the world. There are a few. There is, of course, something happening in China, also on heating meanwhile, solar, but also geothermal. They have actual plans on working on that. But it's not worldwide you do not see consistent policy on renewable heating as we see it now, finally coming up in Europe. We had to fight for that also a long time, so it's clear. But now we see it and it's coming, and we're quite happy about that. A final word, something that is also very clear. A lot more could be done if we had a level playing field. We can have, of course, support schemes, and I think it would be quite helpful to talk about support policies and to look a bit deeper into things like the renewable heat incentive in UK and in the EE-Wärmege, the German renewable heat law from 2009, and the kind of these kind of things, how support can be done. But a lot of this support would not be necessary if we had really level playing fields, and this is why I should be in the other room, listening to what people say, how can we reduce the fossil fuel subsidies? And I understand there is a lot to be done there also in doing it in a way that does not harm the poor. But on the other hand, we cannot subsidize oil and gas for poor, and on the same, just give this money to companies who try to get more oil, we burn more oil, and not develop these kind of level playing fields. So I'm still waiting, I said that several times before, for a subsidized price for renewable energies.
Thank you, Burkhard. Very interesting. On that respect, I happened to be 3 weeks ago in Riyadh, and I don't know whether you're aware, but in 16-year times, 16, Saudi Arabia will be importer of oil. And actually it's becoming a big challenge because there is a need of cooling in this country, which is currently fueled by fossil fuel. And, well, they are heavily subsidizing fossil fuel for the citizens because of poverty reasons, but they cannot cope with it anymore, and they're actually running after European and other technologies for cooling, and this is becoming extremely urgent. So this is just to point on what you said. Manon, would you like to give us some insight about the Dutch case?
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Manon Jansen. I'm the CEO of Ecofis. That's my day job, but I have a second job, and that's how Raan and I met at the bioconference in Paris in June. I also am the chair of the top sector energy for the Netherlands, and the purpose of the 9 top sectors that we have since 3.5 years is not only to develop the sector. In my case, it's also to help achieve the goals that we've set ourselves in the energy deal that we developed in 2013. So I actually think it's more interesting today to speak in my role as the chair of the top sector, because there's quite a few things that we can do better in the Netherlands, and I'm hoping to pick up some learning from you here. Let me start off with a few of the facts. 60% of the final energy use in the Netherlands is used for heating, 60. Half of that is for industry, half of that is for buildings, and about 80% of that is still generated by gas. Even though we do expect, like Werner was saying, heating demand to go down because of efficiency, and we also expect it to actually be generated increasingly from electricity, I think the Netherlands is basically addicted to gas, and I think that's our big issue. And that's also what's going to come at us, because we're heading for a cliff. In 8 years from now, the gas is going to be gone, and we will become a net importer instead of a net exporter today. So to me, the issue in most of these cases is actually not at all about technology. It's about the leadership and the guts to take tough decisions before you have to. It's about fixing the roof while it's not raining. And this is where I think we fail as an energy sector. Because stimulating renewables for heating has proven to be far more difficult than stimulating renewables for electricity production, even though we have so many good opportunities. We have fantastic heat pumps, we have fantastic geothermal solutions, solar thermal, green gas, and all of this we actually stimulate with government money. So I can't even find the excuse that there's no subsidy. I own a budget called SDE+, and with that we actually stimulate innovation in this sector. We also know, smart people that we are in this sector, that sustainable heating is the most cost-effective way to achieve our renewable energy goals in the Netherlands, and we're not doing it. Our goals and ambitions are actually quite ambitious, I would say. I was part of the crew that developed, co-authored the 2013 energy deal, the Dutch version of the Energiewende, 20 years too late, if you ask me. And one of those goals is to actually achieve 1.5% efficiency per year on the final energy use, meaning a total of 100 petajoules by 2020, and that is only 5 years away. We also want to go from 4.5% renewables today to 14% in 5 years. And we know that sustainable heating and heating networks are by far the most cost-effective way to do that, both focusing on industry and built environment, and we're not doing it. So to me, a key question is, why is this not happening? Despite all of the beautiful deals, all of the covenants with industry, all of the local programs, etc. And I actually think that most of the challenges are non-technological, non-technology driven. They're non-financial. There is a very negative image of district heating in the Netherlands. I don't know why, but it is the case that people just don't like it much. Maybe the biggest issue that to achieve regional heating networks is a PPP process that requires vision, trust, and cooperation. And I rest my case. It just takes years to develop such a network, even for small areas. And again, it beats me why smart people like ourselves do this to ourselves. Like Thomas said, I think we're our own worst enemy in this sector. Secondly, we have no level playing field with gas, and believe me, I try to battle that as much as I can in my role as the top sector. There is no obligation to connect to a district heating network in the Netherlands, so you have to make a business case secured by bilateral agreements, which means negotiating with housing corporations. And that has not been proven to be a very easy case. We have an old thing from the past, it's called the Warmtewet, the heating law. It forces compliance with a traditional tariff structure, and lo and behold, they're gas-based. What a surprise. And it isn't very attractive. So yes, if we do this, it is going to cost us a little bit more. But how much are you prepared to pay for a sustainable system and a sustainable planet? Fourth big issue I see is that system-level benefits aren't rewarded, because once you have a network in place, it does mean a huge stimulus for renewable heating sources, but it's really hard to get there. And finally, in a greenfield situation, of which we haven't had many recently, so far the building codes haven't been stringent enough to make heating networks attractive, and many of the new developments are still going back to the old gas network. And that's all of that I can just summarize by saying we're just not doing what's good for us. It's like going on a diet. You know you have to do it. It's just really hard to get started. And I just hope that with conference like we have today, we can just create more of this. It's all about us. It's not about the technology.
Thanks a lot, Manon. You concur with the fact that we have a very bad image of district heating, and maybe joining Werner in his previous analysis. We will come back to that later on. Christoph, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Alexandra. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christoph Laskowski, and I'm a policy officer at Euroheat and Power. We are a European association which represents district heating national associations and manufacturers and utilities in Europe and beyond. I was hoping to start with a joke. and because usually it helps to wake up people. And as I heard, this crowd really enjoy quizzes, so I was going to ask how many of you know what district heating is, but seeing the number of people in this room, you have to be really dedicated to heating and cooling, so you probably know exactly what district heating is. I'm just wondering though, do you know what fourth generation district heating is? There you go. So this is something with what is now being developed, and this is something which goes exactly against this image of district heating being an old technology. This technology is over 100 years old, but it has been developing constantly in the past century, and right now we have some projects which are run on low temperature hot water, and we are even connecting dishwashers and washing machines to district heating. So you can imagine that this is very interesting also for renewable energies which which generate low temperature heat. Why am I saying all this? As you know better than me, the biggest problem that we have with integrating renewables is that they are intermittent in their nature. So district heating, and as particularly fourth generation district heating, can actually be a solution to this issue. However, this requires an integrated approach to the entire energy system, and not only focusing on electricity or transport or heating, in fact, or cooling, but looking at the system as a whole. And district heating connected to thermal storage can provide this excess electricity with a way to store it in the heating tanks, for example, linked to solar thermal or to wind energy, but also to heat pumps. Whenever the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing, we can we can use this hot water and put it back into district heating systems and provide people with heat for space heating or hot water preparation. So overall, what we have carried out together with a Heat Roadmap Europe team from Aalborg and Halmstad universities is a study which actually shows that by looking at the entire energy spectrum and having this integrated approach where we are exploring these flexibilities of district heating networks, working together with electricity systems, and providing these storage opportunities through, for example, heat pumps. That by this we can increase the level of district heating from what is currently today 65 million customers in Europe to 250 million customers in Europe, whilst achieving the same environmental benefits as envisaged by the European Commission in their energy efficiency scenario by 2050, but doing it at a lesser cost. So we could save 100 billion euro annually, doing exactly the same, achieving exactly the same savings in terms of CO2, but just having more sustainable and more balanced energy system. This is something that we are now seeing is being noticed in Brussels. The European Commission, indeed, even in the conclusions on the stress tests, sees that district heating can be actually a solution. Particularly in those countries which are exposed to the gas supply shortages, as these are the countries which have got widely developed district heating networks. So paradoxically, it can be easier for them to introduce large-scale renewables and provide people with renewable heating than it is for countries in the Western Europe where this district heating networks are not that popular. That said, I would like to just maybe add to what Manon was saying, that in fact, even in Netherlands, we see that big change of perception of district heating, and we know that Rotterdam is developing a district heating network. UK right now is a booming market for district heating. London has got a heat plan which envisages 25% of its heating energy being provided by district energy, so by 2025. So there are many positive developments in the markets which were not traditionally district heating markets. So in this sense, I believe that district heating is the technology of the future which can help to integrate renewable energies.
Christoph, thanks a lot. Okay, we'll now move on to a more informal discussion, and let's make a game, right? You need to be shaken up a bit. Let's imagine I am the European Commission, or I represent the government of South Africa, or whatever, and you guys are a bunch of lobbyists, right? And you are. Since we have to enhance the policy framework for heating and cooling, what would you advise to us as policymakers if we have to come up with a brand new strategy on heating and cooling? Would you advise some targets as must go? Would you advise a revision of standards for building? Would you go for performance standards for individual heating? What would you tell us to us, government, public authorities? Anyone who wants to take the floor? Burkhard.
Of course, it will be a mix of measures, and we can take an example already from, or some examples from the European level, but also from national level. So we are not looking, or it's difficult for me, for instance, to imagine really a green field in that, so because we have the examples already. It is important to have both sides to look at. One is the demand and the supply side, so that first energy efficiency in buildings, including reducing the heating and cooling demand of buildings, shading and insulation, all these, and to create standards and legislation that requires new buildings to have better standards and older buildings to be gradually changed. Older buildings is so important because we are talking, meanwhile, in most of Europe, of a new building rate in the order of about 1%. That went down from about 2% some 10, 15 years ago to 1%, about 1% now. So there is not much happening. So we have to look at the old building also. So the one side is to look at these. On European level, we see the EPBD in this respect quite interesting. The Energy Performance and Buildings Directive. That's a full name. The one side. The other side is to bring people to use these technologies by incenting them. We've seen that there are places where legislation is given where there are obligations. We have the case in Germany, where since 2009 there is an obligation for a certain amount of renewable energy in new buildings. And I can't say that for the solar side, I think it works well there, but for the rest of the renewables, I don't think it works well. At least for the geothermal side, it doesn't work at all. So it was always the better way to give incentives. A very interesting one is the renewable heat incentive in UK, which is actually a kind of feed-in tariff for renewables. It's, yeah, you get a payment or a premium for producing what they call microgeneration for heat with renewable energies. So that's an idea. You mentioned SD Plus, which is an interesting scheme also, and maybe you can say a little bit more about how that works, because that's a way how to show how you could do it. And we need, of course, also technical standards. We need support for developing technical standards, and we would need more support for the further development, technical development. Werner was showing this graph, and what you forgot to say is that the Euratom, the nuclear, that's also electricity and not heat. So, of course, so the majority, the vast majority, goes to electricity and not to heat, and there is still a lot that we need and that could be done.
Thank you. Manon, you want to add something?
Yes, let me first address your question and then indeed talk a little bit about SD+. I would actually do everything that we do today and add two things. I would try to create a much stronger sense of urgency in the process. And second, make regional heating sexy. Why is it so negative? And I think it's because it's old-fashioned and because people have a feeling that they're not in control. And I think you can overcome all of that. Rotterdam is a really good example, you mentioned it, but it took 20 years to get where they are today. So sense of urgency, make it sexy. How do you do that? Communicate a lot more, marketing the good things that we have. This subject is the stepchild in the Dutch energy discussions, and it's undeserved. And second, I would actually try to incentivize the process and not the technology, and maybe award some stuff to the companies and the regions who dare to go first and who dare to go fast. So rather than get stuck in the typical Dutch polder process, the everlasting discussions because everybody has to have an opinion and everybody has to be saying it, I would actually incentivize speed. Actually, the whole situation on SD Plus supports that thinking. I actually have two budgets in my top sector, energy, and that makes us a little bit special. It all started with SD Plus, which is a budget to incentivize, it's a subsidy for innovation development for renewable technology only. And we're seeing that the budget actually doesn't get spent every year. It is increasingly harder to spend the money on the technological innovation. And so we created a second budget, and it's called the demonstration budget, to help projects through the valley of death. It's the first year we've done it, and I've just had the results today. We've had 3 times the amount that we've had requests for 3 times the amount that we spend. That proves that the issue is not in technology, but in bringing it to market. And that's where we have to focus.
Okay, as regards communication, tomorrow morning we have a whole session about how to better communicate on renewables. So I hope the heating people will bring their voice and also have a shift from electricity to heating tomorrow morning also. Christopher.
Thank you. So once again, I would like to put an accent on integrated approach to our energy system. It might sound obvious, but it took us a lot of time to actually make sure that the Commission fully understands what we mean by that. Essentially, we fully support the idea to reduce demand in buildings. However, whenever we reach a cost-optimal level at which it makes more sense to actually provide a sustainable supply, then we should be really supporting efforts in bringing more renewable energy to the market rather than limiting the demand in buildings. The Commission's scenario is very ambitious for 2050. However, we don't believe that we will shower less in the future. Actually, I think that we will be increasingly living alone in bigger apartments. If you look, for example, at Scandinavia, the number of square meters per person is what would serve probably 5 Polish families comfortably. That's because they have second, third property. This is something which is not taken by the Commission into account in its modeling, and from our perspective, what is really needed is good data and good modeling, taking the entire energy system into account, and mapping of available sources, available renewable sources, and mapping of demand. So something that I believe Burkhard was touching upon. So just seeing where it is cost efficient to bring renewable energy to cities, and doing so by using the most cost-effective way, at least in cities where the heat demand is dense, that is using district heating networks. On that note, I'm gonna pass it on to Werner.
Thank you.
Okay, question, or you are the Commission? That's nice. I think what we should go, I think we have empty pockets all over Europe. So waiting for big money for renewable heating and cooling would be nice, but all countries, including the Commission, have empty pockets. So I think we have to go for clear targets. And if you look for the goals of the European Commission for 2030, there are targets, but nobody who is guilty at the end. That's the biggest failure in the last years of European Commission to come up with 20. It looks nice for the general public to go for 27% renewables, but without any national targets. I think what was really good is what the 2020 targets. Every country had to come up with their own goal, and this created a huge momentum in the industry everywhere. How can we reach these targets? That creates momentum in the financing sector, in the industry, everywhere, in the research sector. How can we, on national level, reach these targets? And I think to have targets not general for renewables, for electricity, you need to separate it. Renewable targets for electricity and for heating and cooling. This creates a momentum without any cost. Because as soon as the industry says, okay, we have to go, and these are binding targets, you get a momentum without, as I said, budget behind it. And the same, I think it's, so in general, I agree absolutely with the European targets, might be more ambitious, but not just in general. In 2030, I think we blame then Cyprus or a small country, you did not do your homework, we didn't reach the goal, so how do we go in this direction? The same is, if you look on Horizon 2020, it's 40 folds oversubscribed now. So that means it makes no sense at all. And then renewable heating and cooling is competing at the moment with renewable electricity. You can imagine this 1% I showed you for FP7 will decrease for renewable heating and cooling would be 0.5% or whatever. Forget it. So if here the Commission is not changing the policy, we're not gonna reach any of the targets because it's no clear target. It's just looking for something else, and for the general public it sounds good because it's more. So that I think targets, real binding targets for 2030 is really important. Reduction of the fossil fuel subsidies, what Burkhard mentioned already in the other room. And just giving one example, Denmark really shows with solar heating and cooling, which is really in the north of Europe. If they can do it, why can we not do it in other countries? They have district heating, then I think it's a very important enabling technology. They just increased the cost of gas and came up with a good, intelligent financing scheme. There are no subsidies, and this is the reason why it's booming at the moment in north of Europe, where they have no sunshine, and it's basically used for space heating. It's not mainly used for hot water preparation. Also with seasonal storage. So it just shows if there is a political will, something is happening. And what I also, where I want to put a little bit your attention is, we still think we are in Europe the front runners. We lost it in the last 5 years, completely. So I'm mainly working in solar thermal for almost 30 years. The front runners are China, as you mentioned, but it's also Turkey took over Germany 2 years ago. So it's approximately the same size of country. The front runner is here in the region is Turkey. It's not Germany anymore. We lost it. In PV, it's the same. We lost it. And in several other sectors, working for the last 20 years also in IEA, solar heating and cooling, and also in the biomass sector, where it's really going on, it's in other regions of the world. In Asia, there it's happening. In Brazil, there it's happening. We lost the front runner situation. And I'm really a little bit frustrated sometimes if Europeans still think we are the front runners. If you're just looking on the European Union, then you might get the impression this country is better than the other, but what's going on worldwide scale. So we lost this general worldwide view. I absolutely agree with the integrated approach, what we will need, and there I think we need the integrated approach in the next years of thermal electric grids to combine it, exactly what you mentioned. So that means we will have PV, we will have wind, we have solar thermal, biomass, whatever. We need to combine it. When you have too much electricity, put it in a storage, like they do it at the moment already in Denmark again. So that means you use the heat as long as you have a sufficient temperature. If it's too low, if you have cheap electricity from wind, you use it using heat pumps to increase the temperature again. So that means, without going into detail, we need in the next years an integrated approach of thermal electric grids, and there I think we really have to focus, and especially also it is going to happen in cities. As we all know, more than 50% of the world population is already in cities, so we have to come up with solutions for cities, and I at least don't see another solution, especially in cities, than distributed by grids. That means thermal electric grids, and I think that's the way we have to go. And I absolutely agree with Manon. We have to speed up. We are far too slow, or we lost the momentum. But there's no reason not to get it again.
Thanks, Werner, for all these points on the heating targets, the integrated grid, etc., all very well taken on board. You offered me the perfect anchor when mentioning cities. Recently, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, came up with the idea of setting up joint public procurement schemes for renewable technology, because some of them actually cost a lot, and you might get a better deal by pulling together some cities. Like this has been done for tram, for instance. What if it would apply to heat pump, for instance? So I would like to get your, very quickly, what you think about that. Maybe Manon, you've been working on at the city level also. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I think it's a good bridge. I actually wanted to react to what you were saying, Werner, about targets, and I think that this is a perfect bridge. I believe in targets as a temporary tool. But I don't think it's enough. I mean, if I would give you the target that you are going to have to run a marathon in 6 months' time, you can all do that. Everybody can run a marathon with 6 months preparation time. Is that going to truly inspire and motivate you to do it? And I don't think it's enough. So I think when people say, oh, if only we had a target from Europe, I think that's an excuse for not taking action. I think it will help, but I don't think it's enough. And then I think the other thought linked to that is, I think there's a tipping point from, at least when I look at the Netherlands, from the history, the past, where government decided the energy system. Government is no longer doing that. They did it 3 times in the past 30 years, and they failed 3 times to develop a good system. I work for the government 1 day a week, and they're saying, we're not going to do it again. We're going to do that in collaboration with industries, with small, medium enterprises, and with people. And the idea of actually associating people in society to the new energy system, whether it's by crowdfunding on a wind turbine or by having them think through what the regional district heating system should look like, I think is a fantastic idea. And I think that is one way to speed up the transition.
Burkhard and then Christoph, and then we'll open the floor to the audience.
For the procurement, of course, you can have some effects if cities or if regions come together on that. I like to mention an example. There are district heating systems, meanwhile, that also use a very low temperature in the grid and use heat pumps, individual ones, to get up. There is one example just about 20 kilometers from here down the River Rhine on the other side in Troisdorf, using groundwater, a large groundwater reservoir for the basic temperature, and then having individual heat pumps. And there, of course, these effects can be found. In general, I like to warn from one thing that could be misunderstood when we're talking about integrating heat and power. We hear a lot of electrifying the heating market, and we've seen also in the previous sessions, Steve Sawyer was showing the one graph where excess electricity should go into heat storage. That's a good idea as long as it is done just for that, for storing excess electricity, but not if it is there to completely overtake the heating and cooling sector. We have methods to directly produce or supply heat, also directly to supply cold, so we do not need necessarily to go through these. For me, it's quite a way around through electricity and back to heat. So as long as we can do it without that, then it can be much more efficient in general. So both has its sense or its place, but ideologically electrifying the heating market and claiming that this is a way to make it greener, because using green electricity for that, and there was even the word electric boilers on that, if you've seen it, which I didn't like. That makes some sense in northern Sweden, where you have a lot of electricity from the rivers, but generally it's not helpful. So to have a balance here, to use this integration or these as long as it can help stabilizing the demand or absorbing some of the extra electricity, but not as a basic approach to supply all the heating market on that, as we hear it from some sources.
Thanks a lot. If you allow me, I will open up the floor to the audience. Who has a question? I see 1, 2, 3. Right. Bill, you were the fastest. Stand up. Can you just introduce yourself, please?
You're going to hold it for me?
Oh, who knows?
Is it working? Yeah. So my name's Bill Gillett, and I hope Alessandra will excuse me. I've retired from the Commission, so I can lobby now, can I?
Yeah, I can.
No, I should be a good boy.
I lobby myself, you know.
No, I think it's a very exciting time. At the moment, we have a whole new political frame, new parliament, new commissioners trying to do something. And we have to see this change as an opportunity for this heating and cooling sector. And this means that we have to give some message which the politicians can really grasp and understand. And this means we have to package it very carefully. My simple thinking is that we've had quite a push for energy efficiency, and there's very big similarity between energy efficiency and renewable heating and cooling. They go together. As you said, Burkhard, for the new buildings, it's easy. You can regulate what is built for the new buildings. This is not going to solve our problem. What we're trying to do is to reduce fossil fuel consumption, CO2 emissions, in the existing building stock, which Werner, you said, is a major, major part, half of the heating, and mainly in cities. Because the rural ones, they have already quite a high penetration of renewables here in Europe. So we're talking about cities, and we're talking about a building sector in which it's extremely difficult, after you've insulated the loft and the walls, to get down to any reasonable amount of consumption per square meter without a big investment. In fact, it's cheaper, much cheaper, to put renewable heating and cooling inside. The problem is that it's not packaged. It's not an affordable smartphone or something which I can just buy. So I love Manon's idea of somehow joint procurement or some other tools which will put in place a package which a large number of players in the sector can somehow afford to implement. We heard this example about the embassies. They should do something in the developing world. We are doing with the building sector in the energy efficiency area that the public sector should set examples. Why are we not building on that for the renewable heating and cooling more strongly? Because we're not offering, even to the public sector, simple packages. And somebody said PPP. It is PPP. The industry has to help us, the policymakers, to come forward with simple, affordable packages which will deliver. And in today's world, I mean, I'm getting too old now. I've been in this renewables business 40 years now. And when I look at my kids, they don't mend anything. They don't replace. I mean, everything is somehow, you have to buy it and you put it inside. It must be flashy. It must be somehow easy to do. And we have to do that with the renewable heating and cooling. PV is already high-tech, flashy, looks good, you can see it. For goodness sake, heating and cooling, you can feel it. You can't feel electricity. You can't see this electricity. So somehow we have to look, I think, at, as you were saying, really mobilizing packaging that we can use. And sorry for the Horizon 2020 message. I really hope DG Energy will take control of this Horizon 2020 work program. It's not for me anymore. It's been dominated by DG Research, and it's not coming from the market perspective. And what you were saying about non-technological demonstration activity should be there for heating and cooling, and it's not there, and I agree, and I think it's a pity, and I think DG Energy should take its responsibilities. That would be my biggest lobby out of any of it.
Thank you, Bill. So this was for packaging and the lobbying to DG Energy for Horizon 2020. Thomas, maybe you want also to raise another issue before I go back to the panelists.
Thank you. Thomas Nowak from the European heat pump industry, and I'm very happy that even though I'm not sitting in this panel, that the term heat pump was used several times. Because we have a good technology, but if I can take this game that you played and say, you're still the Commission, I mean you are anyhow, and we can ask you some things. And I would like to ask for a shift of perspective. Governments, heads of states, and the Commission have agreed to targets, but without any incentivization, nothing will happen. The point is, if everybody sits there with their targets and doesn't, or is not willing to pay at least some form of compensation for people that say, we will contribute to these targets, then the low gas and oil price at the moment will stop this completely. I've asked this question to Mr. Oettinger. He didn't have any solution. And that brings me to the next point. We have very good policy on a European level. I think, namely, EPBD is perfect. Reducing the energy demand, that acceptable energy demand of buildings is very good, but then having it implemented, and that would be my second wish. We need a stronger government that forces member states to implement what they agreed to in the first place in Europe. I don't know how we can do it really, because there is a lot of resistance, as you have seen in the discussion on the targets, but I think that is essential. So the one is not subsidies, it's actually giving people some money because they help governments to achieve the targets, and the second one, execute what you have decided.
Thanks a lot. Maybe I will move to the gentleman from Terry. You would like to?
Thank you. Thank you. Shirish Garud from Terry. Well, the discussion has been centered around European sector, but we in India also we have similar situation. And I think the main problem here is electricity is looked at as a large investment programs and large investment opportunities. That's why it looks more sexy, as she said. And secondly, this is neither with power sector nor with energy saving or energy efficiency sector. It is somewhere in between, because especially in case of India, for example, there is an energy conservation law, and there is a lot of emphasis on energy conservation in industry, which is again going back to actually thermal energy conservation. There is solar mission and all, but that's all electricity generation. The solar thermal power has been growing quite well and doing very well. In fact, it is economically so attractive that manufacturers are asking government to not to have a subsidy, so that it's an open market for them. But as she said, it's not either of these two, and neither energy efficiency people are looking at it, because it saves fuel, but it is alternate energy, and neither the renewable energy people are looking at it. So I think we'll have to look at the policies, and the mindset need to be changed, where these things becomes.
And then a direct question to you: which ministry in India is managing heating and cooling?
Actually, it is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the gentleman, and then we go back to the panel.
My name is Leif Gustafsson from Sweden. Sweden I mentioned several times here, so I have some comments and maybe some questions. I think Sweden in the 70s was extremely dependent on imported petrol. And when we decided we have to do something due to the oil shocks in the 70s, and we have been quite successful developing district heating system and biomass-based systems. And the main drivers for that was two things. It was an energy tax that was put in charge quite early in the beginning of the 80s. The next thing was also you complemented with a carbon tax. And that was the driver for the whole change. And you developed the industries, a lot of the bioenergy industries and so on, built up the district heating system that didn't exist. I worked that time as a consultant at many municipalities, how they can build district heating system, biomass-based such. What about heat pumps? We have to be very careful putting the heat pumps in district heating system, I would say. We did it in Sweden earlier, but that was because we built a lot of nuclear power plants, and we didn't need the electricity that these nuclear power plants could produce. So we have to be very careful so we don't do that kind of mistake, thinking we can have a lot of wind power to operate with heat pumps. I think CSP-based systems is very good, biomass systems. Geothermal, if you have geothermal, that you get the heat and you don't need the heat pumps between, is very good systems. Then I think it's very important that we build very energy efficient new buildings and renovate the existing energy buildings a lot. And we have to be careful to put, so to say, district heating systems saying they can supply, so we don't need to have energy efficiency. I think it's fundamental that we have very energy efficient energy renovation of existing buildings, and we do much too little about this. What we also can do, I think integrating is very important. We could also integrate and start to build, for example, much more wood frame buildings. When we get a lot of wood residues that we can use for the energy sector, we need less energy to build, for example, wood frame building compared to concrete buildings and so on, and much more carbon efficient.
Thanks a lot. So from the questions here, I retain the need of a packaging, incentivation needs, so how to implement, and there we go back to the local level and maybe nation states. And the very interesting item raised by our Terry colleagues, the fact that this is in between two sectors, and is it a challenge or is this an opportunity? I mean, how can we take this up? And I mean, please, let us be optimistic a little. Christoph.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make Thomas happy once again. I will mention heat pumps. But now I'm going to say something which may make me unpopular. So we believe that individual renewable solutions like heat pumps are really best in rural areas, in cities where heat demand is dense, where there's limited space for individual installations, we actually believe that it is better to integrate large-scale renewable solutions with the district heating infrastructure, and use this district heating infrastructure to bring this renewable heat to people's apartments. And now, looking at the buildings, it is very important that this renewable heat delivered by district heating network is considered in the same way as heat produced from renewable sources on site. I was thinking, because I just looked at you, I was thinking how to package it better. I know that it's funny. It's a funny story. One of our members from Denmark, he once showed me, that was actually the second day of my work at Euroheat and Power. We were at the Congress in Tallinn, and he showed me on his iPhone an application through which he was able to control the room temperature in his house in Denmark. So I don't know, 2,000 kilometers away. So I think solutions like this may be also exploring further possibilities to connect dishwashers, washing machines to district heating. This is something that, at least from my sector's point of view, which I'm not surprised, which I'm sure you're not surprised that I'm here promoting so much, that we could provide to make it more appealing to the public. Now, how to increase investors' interest? Once we convince them that these are large-scale infrastructure investments and that they are on the risk scale similar to investments in government bonds, but they can yield higher yields, then I think that if some appropriate investment environment is created, we can all benefit from this. And it's actually, I come from Krakow, so I will finish on that note. Krakow has got one of the biggest district heating systems in Poland, and the way they are actually developing is that there's just a scheme from the city which is incentivizing people to connect to district heating and stop using their individual coal boilers. So this is fairly simple measure that can be implemented. So as no two cities are really the same, but there are many cities which are still alike. The solutions will probably have to be different depending on the region you come from, I would say. But some general principles, I think, can come from Brussels to shape this framework.
Okay, thank you, Werner. Very quickly, Manon. Okay, ladies first.
I just want to very briefly pick up on Bill's message. I absolutely love the idea of crafting a message to the new team. New team, new opportunities. So only opportunities, no challenges. I think we can also learn on the experience of energy efficiency. It actually, when we talked about those challenges, it made me think of the time I spent with Philips Lighting. I was the chief marketing officer there for 5 years. Actually now 5 years ago that I left Philips Lighting. You don't want to know how much time it cost me to convince Philips Lighting that energy efficiency was a good business theme, because they were only interested in making the best lamps. They weren't interested in the best usage of the lamps. We've learned that lesson. Why don't we apply it to renewable heating and cooling? Thanks for the message.
Thank you. Werner, very quickly.
I want to go first back to the question of electrifying the heating sector. I think there are a lot of stories at the moment. So on the one hand, on the small scale, the excess electricity just to hot water preparation, so to store it. On the other hand, there is the nice story, at least in the middle and northern European countries, even very well insulated houses go for heat pump and PV. I want to see the electricity which is used from now on in November until end of February to serve the heat pumps and to heat the houses. The electricity from the PV is feed into the grid in summer, And where is it in wintertime? Where you use it for your heat pump. So that's just a nice story, and 90% of the politicians, at least coming from Austria, they always tell me, that's for the very well insulated house, that's the solution. Okay, switch it off, make it a standalone system, and you will see how these people freeze in wintertime. It's just a story. And another story, which is reality in the city of Graz, which is the second biggest in Austria. We had 3 thermal power plants, which the excess heat served for the district heating. They switched off the gas power plant because it was not economic anymore. It's just 4 years old. Because in summertime there's a lot of wind and PV electricity in the grid. So it's not economic anymore. They switched it off. They switch off now the other power plant. And now, just because there's a, whatever you call it, from the court, they have to run it over this winter. Otherwise, Graz would have no district heating anymore because they have the problem in the power plant sector. So just shows how renewable electricity influences the power sector. Whatever the solution is in future, it's nobody wants to invest in district heating because in north of Graz there's a big paper mill. They have a lot of excess energy, but this 30 kilometers of district heating, nobody is investing because the paper mill tells everybody, we don't know if we exist in 10 years. So I think it's just showing there's a lot of influence. It's not just the small scale getting rid of PV electricity. It is influencing, and I think it's a normal process now because there is a transition period. But it's not so easy, and a lot of stories around this. And just coming back to PV, I absolutely think that was excellent what happened to PV. They brought the price down. A lot of things happened. But I think still it was just by accident because we had on the first hand really good feed-in tariffs, which some countries did not realize that the prices went down, like in Italy. You could really make money out of it. At the same time, you had a financial crisis or a bank crisis. Nobody trusted the banks. And in the last years, you could get 10 to 6% in this range return of investment. So you would have been crazy to bring the money to the bank instead of investing in PV, which is a good thing, not at all. I think it's an excellent thing, but it was not at all because it was so sexy. It was basically a good financial product. And therefore, the success story, which is excellent if it works like this, but this is what we have to learn from PV. It was a financial product. It was not a technical product. And, of course, without the German feed-in tariff, where the front runner would not have been happen, and without the Chinese who brought the price of the technology down. But in the end, in essence, it was a financial product. And this made it successful, in my point of view at least. And not talking too long, I think what I really liked is also to show who is doing something. So, for instance, in industry, who are the front runners? When we do, thanks to the European Commission, several projects in renewable heat for industry, like Heineken, I can mention it here, maybe we go for a beer afterwards. They have a really excellent program, and they started years ago, and now they really look how they can really run their breweries. It's something like nearly 200 worldwide by renewables. And this is really one of the front runners where we could really access them, and they really are convinced to do something, and they should be better known. There was no push from policy or somewhere. That's really, they want to go in this direction. So coming back to the Netherlands, that's one of the really, in my point of view, convinced companies, and they don't do it because it's cheaper. They have to sell their beer still for a price. And what's missing, it's, I think, financial or strategies. So that means in a lot of renewable heating and cooling applications, we are already cheaper than fossil fuels. The problem we run in is the initial investment is higher. So to overcome this obstacle, again, going back to the banks, maybe they can help out in this way, with the backing of governments to overcome this initial investment, because over the lifetime of the systems, most of them are already cheaper. And this is just what also Heineken told us first with our first project. They told us we want to have a payback of 3 years, maximum 5 years. And this is, and then I thought, you know what you're asking for.
We have to.
Yeah. You ask for something, you get it back in 3 years, and you run the system the next 17 years free of charge. You want to get it for free. And this is just to change the mindset, because this means if they use renewable heat besides biomass, because there is no cost for the fuel itself.
Okay, I think everybody is getting very excited now. It's 6. It's because you're going for an apéro or so. But I have to close down the session. 3 things before we go. First, to REN21. Next time you never organize a parallel session, I want everybody in the room next year, because this is way too small. Second, please do create a LinkedIn community so that we are the front runners and we keep in touch and we go on with this process. And last thing, starting now is the launch of the ECOWAS report in the networking room. So you are all invited for the formal launch and a cocktail. And last but not least, I would like to thank our speakers for their participation and quality.
Sorry, I will just very quickly working. Hello? Okay, it's working. Very quickly, just inform everybody here that we're very much aware of the challenges in the heating and cooling sector, and also the presentation in some of our publications. From our side, we're trying to really strengthen the sections we have in the Renewables Global Stats Report. And basically, it's really inviting all of you to actively participate. We can offer the platform, but we depend very much on your input and critical feedback. And please just go ahead and participate in this collaborative process and come up to me and tell me what you want to change here, and we're there for this.